I want to ask you for a moment to picture or imagine your favorite food, your favorite thing to eat, or at least one of them. I know it can be hard for some of us to pick just one favorite. And feel free to call it out if you're so inclined. What is it that makes this food your favorite, or one of your favorites? What is it that this food gives you? Is it nourishment and health? Is it like a nutrient-rich food loaded with vitamins and minerals and macronutrients and micronutrients? Or is this food a favorite of yours because of how it tastes, its flavor, and perhaps its aroma, its texture? Or is this food special to you because of how it connects to your roots, to your family, or to your culture? Is it a traditional recipe that has been handed down and taught to you by family? Is it something that evokes memories of your childhood, or of holidays, or family gatherings? Now, if you're feeling hungry now, I apologize. Food, real food, that is, gives us life. It gives life to our bodies by providing nutrients and energy. As the saying goes, you are what you eat, and there's quite a lot of truth to that. But beyond physical nourishment, food gives life in other ways, because preparing and sharing food is, of course, one of the best ways we can express love, care, and affection for one another. It forms community. Food is central to celebrations, to some of the most important and joyous occasions in our lives: birthdays, weddings, holidays. Food often, therefore, feeds our hearts and souls as much as it does our bodies. And the reason I'm talking so much about food and about eating and about the life we get from eating is that that is what today's gospel is about. It is about Jesus, his body and blood in the Eucharist, in Holy Communion, as our spiritual food. He says, "Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you." Therefore, we eat Jesus for spiritual life, to receive his life. And that sounds weird to you. Well, good. It should sound weird to you. It is kind of weird. It was indeed shocking and scandalous to many, many of the people who first heard Jesus say these words, as we are told in John's narrative. And indeed, no other major religion really has anything like this. I mean, sure, every religion more or less has some kind of ritual meal, but the eating and drinking of its God or central figure as one of its central and defining practices, no, I don't think we really see that anywhere else. Emma, my wife, who's sitting over there, when she was a PhD student in Boston, once brought one of her roommates without any real knowledge or contact with Christianity, certainly with Christian worship, brought her to her Catholic parish in the Back Bay of Boston, and was thinking at communion that this must seem really, really odd to her, what was going on there. And indeed, it is odd. Now, I say all of this because for those of us who are familiar and accustomed to the Eucharist, as of course so many of us here are, there is the possibility, the risk, that it becomes so familiar so as to become kind of rote, tame, unremarkable, and in a way unfamiliar. We might not even really see it, even though it's right in front of us. And when that happens, we of course lose touch with its incredible reality, its power, its life. And so, almost as if in anticipation of this, Jesus talks about eating his flesh, drinking his blood in shocking and unmistakably physical terms. He says that we receive life by eating his flesh and blood, and the word he uses for eating here in the Greek is a very strong sort of animal word for eating. It's like munching or gnawing. It would be animal. It is animal eating. It's not like clean and tidy or symbolic eating. This is real eating that Jesus is talking about here. Sometimes I think we need to see something familiar in a different light, from a different angle, in order to really see it. And I think this is often true for the Eucharist. So why would Jesus speak this way? I mean, shouldn't it just be enough to believe in Jesus, or to try to follow his teachings, to try to imitate him, or even to have like a ritual meal in memory of him without, the cannibalistic overtones? Why this talk about eating him? Well, I can't presume to know precisely what was in the mind of Jesus. I know that may shock you, but perhaps he was thinking something along the lines that to merely believe in him, to merely follow him, would leave too much distance between him and us. It's as if he had something else, something more intimate in mind. Because here is the great Christian mystery, or Christian paradox. The purpose or meaning or highest achievement of our lives is to be drawn into the divine life, the Trinitarian flow of love between Father, Son, and Spirit that has no beginning and has no end. And yet we human beings are, of course, often quite forgetful of this, and many people miss out on it entirely. They're never drawn into this flow of divine love. We are flesh and blood creatures, and our spiritual senses are often quite dull as we move throughout the world. It's just sort of the way of things. And therefore, we are often unable to really perceive or desire spiritual things, spiritual realities. However, the Christian answer to this dilemma, to this predicament, is not to deny or try to transcend or escape from our physicality, our creatureliness. Rather, we are redeemed and healed through flesh and blood, because we, of course, are redeemed and healed through Jesus, by Jesus, the one in whom the spiritual and the material, the divine and the human are perfectly realized, joined, and in balance. And this, of course, means that our bodies are not a problem. Our humanity is not a problem, which is contrary to what a lot of people sort of get in their religious upbringing and their religious experience. In Jesus, God has taken on, has joined himself to our human, creaturely, and physical life, so that we might take on and be joined to his divine, eternal, spiritual life. The Christian mystery, therefore, is the union, not the separation, of the material and the spiritual. As the great songwriter and poet Leonard Cohen once wrote, "We are a tangle of matter and ghost, of matter and spirit." And so Jesus has given us simple, humble, elemental, earthy things, bread and wine, to be a reminder of this, to be his real and continued presence among us, to be the means by which, as he says at the end of Matthew's Gospel in the Great Commission, the means by which he is with us always, even until the end of time. He has given us these things to be the vehicle of our deepest spiritual union with him in this life, a union through which our life continues past the boundary of death. He says twice in today's passage that the one who eats this bread will live forever. Because to be joined to the divine life is, of course, to be joined to a life that never ends. But, of course, this living bread isn't just given for us, for our benefit alone as individuals. It's given for the world. It's given for everyone and for all creation. He says today that the bread which I shall give is my flesh for the life of the world, for the life of the world. And when we truly live by this bread, we find ourselves united not only to God, but to one another, and in a way to all creation. St. Paul writes that because there is one bread, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread. This to me is one of the most beautiful and moving things about the Eucharist, that even within this one church community, even within these walls, we are a gathering of people from different generations, walks of life, backgrounds, places, races, tax brackets, political persuasions. There are people here who would probably never otherwise know or have reason to associate with one another. But we are all brought together here. We are all made one at the communion rail. And now think for a moment about Christians all over the world celebrating and receiving the Eucharist today. What great diversity, a great multitude from every nation, from all cultures and languages. We are, in a real sense, one with them. We are related to them. We are part of one family. This is our shared family meal. And this, of course, means that we have some responsibility to them, right? The spiritual and mystical elements of our faith always have an ethical and moral component. But the extent to which this sort of Eucharistic union with God and with one another is experienced and realized in our lives, the extent to which it bears fruit in our lives, it depends in some part upon us. It depends in some part upon our inner disposition as we approach it, as we receive it. If we approach it idly, distracted, without interest, without devotion, it's not the worst thing in the world. God will not strike you down. But we'll miss out on something. We'll miss out on the fullness of what it is, the fullness of what it can give us, the fullness of life that is offered in it. But if we come prepared with a desire, with a hunger, right, with a hunger for this food, for Christ to dwell in us and we in him, to in some real way be changed into him in his love, his compassion, his wisdom, his holiness, his courage, then Sunday by Sunday, Eucharist by Eucharist, communion by communion, it can change your life. It does change lives. So remember, as you approach the altar today, you are what you eat. Or as St. Augustine said, long before that phrase was coined, behold what you are, become what you receive. Amen.